We're such good friends that we can talk about anything, my daughter-in-law and I. Can we really? You're the only one talking. That's wrong, isn't it? That's how you maintain appearances. Stop trying to cover things up. With such a layer of deceit, a stage built upon lies like that will collapse sooner or later. Since my father-in-law passed away, in order to fulfill my mother-in-law's request, is it okay if we live together? I nodded to my husband's words. The actions and words of my mother-in-law were more problematic to my husband than me. Even so, my kind husband was moved by my mother-in-law's words, "I'm lonely." It seems his feelings were stirred. As for me, I wanted to respect my husband's feelings. But as far as I can tell from the stories my husband has told me, she doesn't seem to do anything decent. It would be nice if she grew up a bit. My hopes of that were dashed on the day we started living together. She betrayed them easily. Suddenly, under the pretext of discipline, she began to use violence. When I was cooking, my mother-in-law, "Your cutting method is incorrect." She slapped my hand that was holding the knife. That's too dangerous, isn't it? While holding a knife, who slaps someone's hand? What if you make a mistake? My mother-in-law's dangerous behavior didn't stop there. When I was ironing, "What is with your ironing method? You're not doing it correctly." And then she slapped my hand that was handling the iron. It's not as dangerous as a knife, but it's still dangerous. In both cases, if I resisted poorly, it seemed she would become more dangerous and violent. I had no choice but to endure, and my mother-in-law became more and more assertive. The most dangerous situation was when I was vacuuming the corridor on the second floor. My mother-in-law, "You can't even vacuum properly," pretended to take the vacuum cleaner from me and bumped into me, trying to push me down the stairs. Before I fell down the stairs, I somehow managed to twist my body and fell on my backside in the hallway, which saved me. Her actions are too impulsive. Regardless of sympathy or anything else, my husband, who decided to live together, must have thought it would be bad if my mother-in-law's bullying me was exposed. In front of my husband, she's as meek as a borrowed cat. In my opinion, her trust value from my husband is already close to zero, so even if she pretends to be innocent, it would be useless if I report what she has done to me. However, given the current situation, when I consider my husband's feelings about deciding to live together, I feel sorry, and I couldn't speak out. Such an indecisive attitude of mine, I believe, has certainly emboldened my mother-in-law. Otherwise, such a poor cook wouldn't be able to give me any advice. She thinks steamed clams and sake is a dish boiled in alcohol. That's what kind of person she seems to be. Go, I wanted to ask. She threw the clams into a pot full of sake and boiled them. When she served that as steamed clams and sake, I was truly surprised. It seemed she didn't taste it. It tasted quite disappointing. I can't help but sympathize when I think that my husband has been fed such things since he was a child. I just can't help feeling sorry. Even the amount of seasonings is so arbitrary. Depending on the dish, she might cook while referring to a cookbook, but whether it says tablespoon or teaspoon, she always uses the same spoon. But it's better when she uses a spoon. Most of the time, she pours directly from the seasoning container, without measuring the quantity. There's no way the flavor can be consistent that way. She even tries to fry things starting from a low temperature, so it gets mushy. It's really soggy. I try to point it out as kindly as possible, but my mother-in-law says, "This is our family's tradition," and stubbornly refuses to improve her cooking skills. Given such a statement, all I can say is, "Oh, is that so?" I couldn't say anything else. If I say more, she'll get angry. Especially when my husband isn't around. If I don't handle my counterattacks carefully, I think the damage will just get worse. I can't afford to say anything reckless. After all, she even tried to push me down the stairs. The issue of her poor cooking skills could be solved if I cook instead, but the risk of her direct attacks needs some kind of solution. Living separately would be the safest option, but that might also mean denying my husband's kindness, and I'm increasingly unsure of what to do. But then my mother-in-law does something that just blows away all my doubts. When my mother-in-law puts on a nice face, I thought she only did it for my husband, but she does it for relatives and neighbors as well. She acts as if she's such a peaceful person, and starts saying things like, every time she talks to someone, "We're so close, we can talk about anything." She tells such lies without a hint of remorse. I've been subjected to all kinds of verbal abuse, even violence, and I put up with it all along. All I did was give advice about cooking. At the very least, we're certainly not so close that we can talk about anything. In fact, I'm almost at the point. I'm nearly driven to the point where I can't say anything. If I hadn't managed to fall on the spot, as my mother-in-law wished, I might have fallen down the stairs. And then, even if I wanted to speak my mind, I wouldn't have been able to, you know. That could have been a possibility. My mother-in-law's lies really infuriate me. Fine. If she wants a relationship where we can say anything to each other, let's have a relationship where we can say anything. I don't care if she regrets it. It's not my problem if she regrets it. But still, fighting silently with my mother-in-law might trouble my husband, so I think I'll.
Sorry, darling, I might end up having a conflict with your mother.
Just giving you a heads up. Normally I'm quiet, so him hearing me say such things must have seemed odd. My husband raised his eyebrows in surprise. Then, with a little smile, "Fine, but don't push yourself. If things get tough, you can ask for help right away, okay?" He asked me to promise. Feeling like I had gained reinforcements, I nodded firmly. Starting from the very next day, I began to counterattack my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, approaching me as I was cooking, exclaimed, "How many times do I need to say it?" Just as she was about to bully me, I flashed the kitchen knife at her.
Eek!
She let out a short shriek and tried to back away, but I swiftly stepped on her foot, blocking her retreat, and said, "Mother-in-law, you tried to hit my hand again, didn't you? When I'm using a knife, you should know. It's dangerous to do something like that, right?" I continued, moving the knife closer to her. I was doing something far more dangerous, but for now, I put that fact aside and said exactly what I wanted to without holding back. My mother-in-law turned pale and nodded shakily. Satisfied, I stepped off her foot, and she fell backwards in a graceless heap. On another day, in the pot where I was simmering a dish, she stuck in her chopsticks, attempting to take a sneak bite. I slapped her hand away swiftly, causing her to drop the chopsticks. "Please do not behave so disgracefully as to eat from the pot," I scolded her. Instead of snitching someone else's cooking, I wish she would taste her own dishes. That's what I want from my mother-in-law. Then she might be able to cook something that tastes a bit more decent. Because she never learns, even after all this. While I was ironing, she approached and poked my shoulder, saying,
Aren't you doing the ironing all wrong?
She always finds something to criticize. I grabbed my mother-in-law's extended arm, yanked it hard and pulled her down. In front of my fallen mother-in-law, the iron stood imposingly.
Eek!
She let out another short shriek and tried to back away on all fours. I grabbed her collar and immobilized her. Leaning close to my mother-in-law's ear, "Listen, mother-in-law. I'm currently using the iron, you see. Understand? If you accidentally touch the iron, you could get burned, right? If you were to bump into it, it could be dangerous, wouldn't it?" I said it to her, like scolding a child. Even here, my mother-in-law nodded many times, as if trembling. Until now, I've never opposed my mother-in-law, you see. But now, every time I do something, it comes back at me. It seems she's genuinely feeling fear. The way she looks at me, it's as if she's seeing a monster or something. But this is what my mother-in-law wished for. A relationship where we can say anything to each other. You're happy, aren't you? Just as you wished for. Whether it was because my mother-in-law was upset, it seemed like she couldn't make a reasonable decision, and instead of letting it go, she turned to my husband,
Your wife is bullying me!
And cried for help. Unfortunately for her, I've already talked to my husband. No matter how much she tries to fabricate the story, my husband won't lend her an ear. In the first place, I wonder if she has forgotten what kind of treatment she's been giving her own son. My mother-in-law often throws tantrums and keeps slapping my husband. Even though her husband scolds her every time, it's a bad habit of hers that has never improved. Moreover, from what I heard from my husband, what I especially found repugnant was, when my husband was in the lower grades of elementary school, he bought carnations with his saved pocket money and presented them to his mother. She slapped his hand, made him drop the carnations, and scolded, "How dare you spend money
On something that will wither so soon!"
Then she reportedly slapped his face several times. Yeah. She hasn't changed at all from the mother-in-law I know. I love my husband, but showing kindness to my mother-in-law was a mistake, I think. She's the worst. My husband, who coldly looks down at his wailing mother, says my wife wouldn't do anything to someone who hasn't done anything to her. You must have said something sarcastic or hit her, didn't you? And he jumps to conclusions. My mother-in-law turns red in the face and protests, "I didn't hit her face or anything like that.
I only lightly slapped her hand."
And she nonchalantly confesses her violence. My husband shouts,
So you did hit her?
And she turns pale again. It was a little bit of leading questioning, but she fell for it without hesitation. My husband doesn't particularly like his mother in the first place, nor did he decide to live together with her. He seems pretty fed up with the fact that her violent tendencies have not improved at all. Here I reveal my feelings and say, "When we started living together, you said, 'This is discipline,' didn't you? But to me, it felt nothing less than bullying. It was extremely stressful. Stress can even affect pregnancy, you know? In the environment that you create, I don't have the confidence to show you the face of your grandchild." I expose my feelings. Tears started to fall as I spoke. But it seemed that my mother-in-law did not like what I was saying.
Ha! Don't you dare blame me for not being able to have children. Even though you're nothing more than a good-for-nothing daughter-in-law. I'm the one who's getting stressed here. If you have a problem, just leave.
She hurled these words at me. To this, my husband responded, "Fine. We will leave as you wish. We moved in because you insisted, But you have the audacity to insult my wife. We will never live with you again, he declared. In a panic, the mother-in-law exclaims, "Wait.
You've got it all wrong. I was talking to the daughter-in-law, you know? Not to you."
But her son dismisses her claim, saying it's the same thing. He doesn't entertain her objections. The mother-in-law shrieks in exasperation and raises her hand at him out of old habit, but her son isn't the little boy he used to be. He's significantly taller and stronger than her now. The son coldly looks down on his mother. Her raised hand drops, losing its target, and her eyes dart around restlessly. The son sighs and says, in the end, "Mom, you haven't changed at all. I was hoping you might have improved a bit, but I was clearly too optimistic." He then takes me into the bedroom. Behind us, the mother-in-law cries out, "How cruel!" But no matter how much she protests, it's too late to change anything now. Because my husband has decided to leave, we'll start looking for a new home tomorrow and begin packing our things, so we'll likely be quite busy. But knowing that we'll be free from my mother-in-law, my heart feels incredibly light. Busyness? It's a small price to pay. Until we left the house, my mother-in-law tried to emotionally manipulate my husband, and even tried to intimidate me, attempting in every way possible to prevent us from moving out. She pulled out all the stops, but not once did she try apologizing for everything that's happened. This only confirmed our belief that even if we continued to live with her, she would just repeat the same behaviors. Because her interference was all talk, we managed to move without any issues. We didn't tell her our new address, so there have been no surprise visits, allowing us to quietly make a fresh start. That's where we are now.